honor and acknowledge the Muncie, Lenape, and Wappinger people that cultivated this soil that we now call East Harlem, New York. I am so excited that we are able to continue the One Wall movement. I long for the day where there are murals all over the world that are a part of this movement to highlight marginalized visual artists. I know that you will gain some valuable information about this project, and I hope you apply or share the information with someone who should apply. Thank you again for joining us. I hope to see you soon, either in person or virtually, at a future High Arts event. I will now pass it on to our program manager, Joyous Pierce, and collaborator and curator, Ayana Ayo. Thank you.
Evening, everyone, and hello. My name is Joyous Pierce. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm a multidisciplinary creative, curator, healer, and cultural producer, and the head of the programming department here at High Arts. And we're so excited to have all of you virtually joining us for our One Wall Movement Open Call info session. High Arts is a leading cultural hub within the urban arts movement, located right at the heart of El Barrio. Through our artistic development residencies, Critical Breaks and Skylab, vibrant multidisciplinary creative programming, and civic engagement opportunities, we encourage and cultivate space for artists to develop bold, new work while creating a positive, lasting impact on our collective community. High Arts is the only institution in New York City and one of the few in the country exclusively dedicated to supporting and developing the creative language of hip hop and an ever-evolving urban aesthetic. Over the last year, our team has had the joy of collaborating with Let's Paint in August to launch the One Wall Movement. The One Wall Movement is a large-scale mural initiative that centers the voices and talents of muralists, writers, and street artists who self-identify as BIPOC, people of the global majority, women, femmes, trans, non-binary, and/or gender non-conforming artists. We're so excited to launch the second year of One Wall with curator and founder of Let's Paint in August, Ayana Ayo. A little bit about Ayana. Ayana Ayo is an independent art and cultural worker whose New York City upbringing has heavily inspired and motivated her career path. She believes in the transformative power of art to impact the socio-emotional and intellectual development of individuals and society. She's committed to spreading and fostering these ideas and values, and since 2016, Ayana has carved out a niche for herself, bringing her art and administrative experience to the public art sphere to produce and coordinate public art initiatives for various organizations and corporations. Other prominent clients have included Lyft, TIA, and the US Census Bureau. She has a BA in American Studies and Organizational Management from Claremont McKenna College and is a graduate of the UPenn and National Art Strategies Executive Program in Arts and Culture and was a 2018 Singapore International Foundation Arts for Good Fellow. Yes, so welcome our fabulous collaborator,
Thank you.
Ayana.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm so excited to be doing this and hosting our second info session.
Yes. Oh, 1 second. There we go.
Yeah, that's me. So yeah, Let's Paint in August is a company that I founded really to hold the branch of some of the projects that I am taking the curatorial lead on. So I'm really, really excited to be partnered with High Arts. I couldn't think of a better partner to be leading my first sort of large-scale curatorial project. And this is an annual initiative, and we're just getting started, right? We really are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just getting started. And so foundational to my curatorial practice is really sort of using art and design to embody equity. And so if you don't mind going to the next slide, Joyous. The way that this project has come to mind, it's not sort of just happened overnight. It's something that there's been a long history of me thinking about, me having conversation with artists. And so like all of my work, it really is community motivated and led. And so One Wall would not exist without the network of artists that I've had the pleasure of talking to, knowing, working with. or hoping to work with. I've learned, I've listened from your concerns and what you are observing and what I'm also observing as someone, in the administrative side. And that is that street art, is the largest, I would say hip hop, actually. Hip hop is the largest export of American culture. And with that sort of street art falling underneath that umbrella. And particularly, I saw this growth in like 2016 of all these sort of public art initiatives that were taking place, sort of under the brunt of creative placemaking happening in America, in Europe, the introduction of very large scale festivals. But what I just noticed is that there weren't a lot of, people of color at these festivals. And so people who have really birthed this movement were not being afforded the same opportunities. And these is, not only did I notice this, but these are based on conversations I was having with artists. And some conversations I've had with curators who work in these industries, who've pushed back about using certain artists. I'll refrain from here, sharing the exact wording that they said. But I realized that there needed, this was what was missing. And this was a major issue. And sort of why I'm so excited to be working with High Arts is that sort of the former executive director, Raymond, was really the first person that I was able to open up to and say, like, yeah, this is kind of what I've been thinking of doing, and really want to lead curatorial projects where I'm creating these opportunities for people who look like us so that they are able just to do their work. And he was the first person that who didn't look at me like I had six heads. He got it immediately. And so in 2020, I was able to work with him, and also now the executive director, Aaron, to start talking about what One Wall would look like. And if it's something I was still thinking about, and that's how the partnership was born. And it happened during the summer 2020 where, there were, I want to say that there was like a new social uprise, was where that there was a lot of media attention, being pressured to things that, people in the community have been saying for years and decades. But there was a special eye, and it seemed that like, okay, this is like now hit the mainstream media enough that, we can really have, I think maybe the people are ready for us to have this conversation. And from that, we birthed One Wall.
Thank you, Ayana. As Ayana shared, One Wall has been a huge labor of love and collaboration over the course of, I think, maybe the past 3, 4, almost 5 years now. And as it continues to develop internally within High Arts, we just wanted to share what our foundation is for the project internally, and how we're drawing connections between this initiative and our larger programming. So the goal of One Wall Movement for us as an organization is to be an ongoing program of the collaborative public works and adaptive community engagement branches of the Hip Hop Center for Social Innovation, or as we lovingly call it, HHCSI. HHCSI, which was also initiated by the former ED, Raymond Condrington, is a destination for innovators who are reshaping our cultural landscape through their work. The center will engage the principles and philosophy of hip hop, such as the art of listening with intention, the cipher, and collaborative reasoning, as well as the creative practice of hip hop, which can include, but is never limited to, core artistic elements of emceeing, graffiti, DJing, and b-boying and b-girling, as a vehicle for civic engagement, social cohesion, and building political power both locally and globally. And some of our objectives that we've really put at the core and center and driving force behind what One Wall Movement will achieve and how it seeks to impact the community are here, which I'll share with you. One Wall Movement will empower and amplify the narratives of marginalized and or historically underrepresented muralists, writers, and street artists. One Wall Movement will cultivate and support emerging and established artists by providing an opportunity for development and building a professional artistic pipeline to larger institutions. and One Wall will engage the East Harlem and New York City communities through public art. And to speak to how important community engagement is to the core of One Wall movement, I'll pass it to Ayana.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So we're sharing these, just to piggyback what Joy's saying, we're sharing this because, as I said, this really is sort of a artist community led initiative. And so we're sharing these because this is sort of the rubric that we're setting for ourselves, and want to make sure that we're representing artists, as our goal, our shared goal is to support artists. And so, One Wall will solicit community input in the artist selection process. And so there'll be a selection committee that reviews all of the applications that are involved in actually deciding who will be painting. We empower artists to freely and organically reflect their lived experiences through visual storytelling. So very specific and fundamental to this project is, we are not dictating what the artist is going to paint. There's no theme that's off limits. We really want to know what you have to say. And we recognize that sort of there have been unfair burdens where, people who are from marginalized communities are often forced to do a certain type of art, or feel additional pressure to create sort of Black art or women art or trans art. We believe that if that's who you are, you just creating art will naturally be about these lived experiences without you having to, feel pigeonholed, if you would, to perform to some outside criteria or rubric. So that's incredibly important to us and fundamental to the project. And why it's called One Wall, right? All you need is one wall to say what you got to say. We're committed to paying artists a living wage. And we're also thinking of other ways to sort of redefine what community engagement looks like. So there are community members that are involved in this project. And as we go further on and talk about sort of the application process and also what the process is, and also later on when Mattaya joins us for our conversation, you can hear about her experience. But part of the challenge is sort of curatorially for us, and also for the artists, we ask you how you would like the community to be involved. And it's an artistic decision, but one that does involve the larger public. And this, I think also really, really important to note is the last line is what One Wall will not do. We will not ask artists to relinquish artistic control to us or our partners. Even from if you get to the section, the part 2 or of the application process, and you are then asked to submit a proposal, your proposal stays with you. The work that you create is your work, as well as your ideas are your ideas. And so we will fight for you, for you to keep those. So to find the actual application, this is the website. And so the open call itself, I want to just say it once, and I'm going to say it like 20 times. This is not a call for proposals. It's not a call for proposals at all. There's so much intention. If you couldn't tell how passionately Joyous and I are speaking about this, that we've put into this process. And so we're intentionally calling it an open call, and it's intentionally meant to be simple and straightforward, and for us to get to know you as an individual, a little bit about your work and what's important to you. And so the questions are leading up to that, as well as sort of the eligibility. Oh yeah, so artist eligibility. So emerging and established muralists, writers, and street artists. And I actually wanted to note that sort of we're trying to be all encompassing, and we recognize that people use different terminology. And so I hope at any point, I may switch it up by calling someone a muralist, I may say street artist. I hope it doesn't offend anyone. It's just one, it's a mouthful to say all those things all the time. So please forgive me. But I do recognize the history and the difference, but also, you know, so many people have preferences for how they identify. But we want it to be all encompassing, and we're not also setting limitations or what does it mean to be emerging or established. This is you self-defining those terms for yourself. We're asking the artists that self-identify as well as Black, Indigenous, people of color, people of the global majority, women, excuse me, femme, non-binary, trans, and or gender non-conforming. We want to see that you also have the ability and technical knowledge required to do something on a large scale. So whether that's something that you have led or something that you've assisted with, as well as things that you've done by yourself. But it is important that you have prior public art experience and have painted before. And at this time, we are giving priority, I'm going to be very upfront, to artists that are in the New York City tri-state area. But this is an open call that has a rolling deadline. And as we talk about the future of this program, because I said we're just getting started, we would love to open this project up to globally. So if you are currently living outside of the United States, please do apply. And we do hope that, you know, there's a point in time in the next 5 years where we can actually have you come over. So please apply so we know about you. And it doesn't matter if you work individually or if you work as a team, you are also eligible to apply.
Mhm. So for our allies, while One Wall is and has been created and envisioned as an all-inclusive initiative, we are prioritizing and seek to support specifically muralists, writers, and street artists who self-identify as BIPOC, people of the global majority, women, femmes, trans, non-binary, and or gender non-conforming. But there is plenty of space for support and allyship in the work that One Wall is doing and ways to support the artists, the muralists, and the communities that we serve, and High Arts, and Let's Paint with August, everyone involved. So in thinking about how we can continue to build inclusive and supportive communities for the artists that we're going to be serving through One Wall, there's different ways for our allies to plug in and lend their support. And some of them are by spreading the news about our open call and resharing our posts with peers, friends, and family at High Arts NYC, encouraging others to learn more about, engage with, and support local and public artists. Volunteering, we always need hands on deck during the mural reveal, during the community days, and even in general, just to support and keep the morale up for the artists. So join us for on-site workshops, installation process, and the unveiling days. Always, you're welcome to donate to the One Wall movement, and encourage peers, friends, and family to do the same. And like I said before, show up and support our muralists during their installation days. Literally, in-person support. There's nothing like it for public artists. This is in a public space. There's plenty of traffic, but having folks that show up every single day to just encourage and keep spirits high is always welcome. So friendly faces, words of encouragement, and laughter are always welcome. Okay. Again, just to reiterate, this is not a call for proposals, but in keeping with the idea of making sure that this submission process is as easy and as accessible as possible for all members of our community. There are 5 short questions with 300 word limit each for that make up the application process. The first question is, what community do you call home? The second question is for an opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about yourself via an artist blurb. The third question is, what is a project that you've worked on that you're proud of? The fourth question is an artist statement. And the fifth question is why you're interested in this project. And again, we want to keep it as open and as accessible as possible. So please feel free to speak in your own voice, to highlight your personal narrative and your personal truths and what really has drawn you to this. We really care about the individual investment and how it it plays into your creative process as an artist at this point in your journey. And yeah.
I'm so sorry, Joyce. Can I also just add, also, we're saying artist blurb, an artist statement. Again, the goal is to make this as accessible to our community. And so if your artist blurb is, a bio that you've worked on, that's great. If it's not, that's also okay. And the same for your artist statement. Really, it's wanting to know what motivates you, what inspires you. So if it's not sort of the traditional artist statement that you've seen, we don't want you to be turned off by these words. As Joya said, come as your truest self. That's what we want. That's who we want to know.
We want to hear your story. And I think one of my favorite questions in the submission application is, what community do you call home? Because if you haven't already guessed, community is really at the core of this project, and community engagement is at the core of this project as well. So we really want to learn about you and where you call home, and how you shape your perspective as an artist as well. In terms of submitting artwork samples, images, links, and videos are welcome. The more material, the better. Anything that you can give us that you feel will help us shape an idea of the work that you're excited about, that you've done, and an idea of, your style and your voice as an artist.
Yes, we also include obviously a space for you to share your Instagram account or website. Both of them are optional. So if you don't have and I'll say this, if you don't have an Instagram that has professional examples of the work you've done, you might be beautiful, but we want to be able to see some of your work. So if it's mostly selfies, maybe not the best thing to share with us. But we also recognize that not everyone has social media, and also not everyone has a website. But if you do, you're also able to include that so we can get deeper, because we do only ask for 5 examples of your work. And so just give us what you're most proud of, and then we'll do the deep diving to look at everything that you've done.
Trust me, we will do the deep dive.
We'll dive.
Okay, so now diving into our open call timeline. Let's see. So we're already into December. If you're here, then you know that the open call is live. And we're so excited that you're watching this to join us, to learn more information, and to hopefully apply for this year's round of One Wall. Today is the December 12th live info session. So thank you for joining us. After the info session in December, we're gonna move into January, where we begin the evaluation process of all of the wonderful, wonderful submissions that we're going to receive. January 2nd, the summer 2023 muralist open call will close, and the shortlisted artists will begin to be selected. In February, shortlisted artists will be asked to prepare their proposals. And then following those proposals, the shortlisted artists will be interviewed by our amazing community-centered stakeholder selection committee, excuse me. And then in February, the artists will also be selected as well. And then in March, we will announce with our community who the phenomenal, lucky muralist will be that will be joining us as our muralist for the 2023 iteration of One Wall. And before we go on to the timeline for the project, I just wanted to rewind for a second and go back to the February process. So as Ayana mentioned before, there are multiple steps in the selection process, which are all detailed on our website, as well as on the application. But I did want to highlight that the 2-step process that we have has been curated specifically to engage stakeholders that we've identified and community members that we've identified who have a heart for this, and who are passionate about the work that One Wall is putting forth, to be the voices in the room to help make the decisions around the artists that will be chosen. So just something that we like to highlight and keep in mind. And after the selection process is done, there will be an interview with those community stakeholders as well. You can find out more information about who those stakeholders are, because transparency is really important to our process as well. Information about them will be posted up on our website, so you can get to know the people who are in the room making the decisions, and who will be looking over your applications. So pass it to Ayana.
Yeah, before we move on to the next slide, I also just want to note that we're saying, I said earlier that that's a rolling, like it's an open call rolling deadline. So it is. The application is always live. We did some tweaking, and so we're relaunching it. But it's now always live. And so if you've actually have applied in the past, you actually do not need to reapply. So you will already be considered for the summer 2023. I do understand that, you know, it might have been a while. You may not remember if you applied. If that's the case, feel free to reach out to myself or Joyous, and we will check for you. Same goes for like if you've done something new and you want us to know about it, and you have some pictures that maybe you just haven't gotten around to posting on your Instagram or your website. Again, contact us and we can, you know, add those to your file on our end, so you don't really have to worry about reapplying. But that being said, I'm going to say it again, January 2nd is the deadline for where, if you are in our system, that's who we will be looking at. So you're welcome to apply after that date, but you will be considered for the next round. But I highly recommend, you know, even if you're booked up for the summer, apply. Just like, you know, it's intentionally a short application, and you never know. So please do apply. Yeah, you never know.
Apply.
Apply. And tell people to apply, not just you, tell everybody.
Yeah. Please share it with your community.
Yes.
So diving now into our One Wall movement project timeline. This just gives a breakdown month by month of what you can expect as the muralist, of what our process would be in, and so through installation, through rendering, all the way up until the reveal. So it starts in March after the announcement has been made about who the artist will be. We begin with finalizing the rendering, and then, as we stated before, community engagement is a huge part of the process and the design of One Wall movement. So we're going to begin the community engagement conceptualization process, which is collaborative between the artists and between High Arts and between Let's Paint August and Ayana and the community stakeholders. So it's a really exciting collaborative process.
Joyce, before you move on to April, I just want to quickly state, so if you are shortlisted during that process, when you submit your proposal, we will ask sort of like, how do you envision the community being involved? And so it's from that idea. So I know there's, again, the goal is to also sort of redefine what people think of when they think community engagement and public art. And so it's an artist-led decision. And so that's why we're saying conceptualize. We're taking the direction from where you're going and providing some input, some feedback, some questions, tapping into our networks of our partners and community stakeholders, hopefully also tapping into yours to sort of realize your idea of what's possible. And then sort of April and May, we're building on that. We're figuring out, okay, this is what our idea, this is what your idea is, this is what you would like to do, this is how we're going to execute it. And there are a lot of possibilities. And it's also okay if you're like, you know, I've never really done this type of community engagement before. I don't really have any experience, but I'm interested. That's also okay.
Yeah, it's a very collaborative process, which is why it's stretched out, and it actually takes up the majority of the timeline for the project, because conversations will really inform how this develops, and it is artist-led, like Ayana said. So it really is specific to your work and your vision and what you have in mind, and also to the community and location of the wall. given this year. After May and June, community building and outreach, we move into, April and May, community building and outreach, we moved into June, where the mural will be completed, and then into July, where the mural reveal will take place.
Yes, we'll have a celebration.
Oh yes, we definitely have a celebration plan. And then the community building and outreach and work and conceptualization that took place during April and May, that community engagement element will take place during the life of the mural at some point.
Yes.
Okay.
And see, that was so simple. Look, that's it.
Easy and painless.
It's so simple. Like we're done talking. We have nothing else to say about the application. And so I think this is our break for any questions that you might have, whether they're about sort of the history and our conception, or sort of the actual application itself, or anywhere along the process.
So feel free to drop those questions in the chat, or raise your hand. We'll be monitoring to see if there's anything, and we're happy to answer. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're settling into your bodies. Thank you for being present with us for the first half of our info session. We're so excited now to be joined by Mattaya Fitz, who is our inaugural one-wall muralist artist last year, is going to share some amazing experiences and her feedback, and just overall insight about the experience of being a one-wall muralist. So welcome, Mattaya.
Hello.
Just about Mattaya before we get started. Mattaya Fitz is a visual artist whose practice encompasses a multidisciplinary approach within a studio and street art discipline. Using figurative elements of abstraction, Mattaya depicts aspects of the human condition in a multi-layered way, inviting the viewer to interpret the work through a lens informed by individual and collective cultural narratives, the Earth's ecology, and divine femininity, yes. Using vibrant color palettes, her often fantastical artworks appear as images in which fiction and reality merge and meaning shift to create new worlds and characters that continually evolve, which you'll be able to see in her fantastic mural, Musa, that was debuted last year during the mural project. So welcome, Mattaya.
Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for joining us. We really, really appreciate you being able to join us on this info session, and just wanted to take this time to talk about the experience. And so artists that are applying can know about it. And so we'll just start sort of, why did you apply?
Yeah, sure. So when I actually moved to New York City, I want to say right before COVID started. And when I first came here, I didn't really know that many people. So looking for but I knew I wanted to do murals. So looking for prospects, you kind of have to take initiative and kind of reach out to people, do your research, look for organizations. And I'm not sure, I don't know if I was on Instagram, or I was just looking up organizations throughout New York, but High Arts came up. And then I saw the call for art, and I feel like what I saw just kind of also matched the type of work and the values that resonate with me. So I was like, okay, it wouldn't hurt to apply to this. You don't know your chances of getting something when you apply, but you kind of have to just give it a shot. So I decided to do that. And I was definitely I was thrilled when when you reached out to me, and I was like, hey, we'd like to continue.
Yeah, I remember, you applied during a special moment, because this project, One Wall, kind of did start during COVID. And so when we talk more about what the process is of you creating it, I know that experience really impacted the final work that you created, and also how it grew over the 2 years. But I remember being like, oh, who's Mattaya? And just being so happy seeing your application and your proposal. So we have this still image that's up here, this gorgeous photo of you from our mural celebration, and you're kind of summarizing what Musa is about, your piece.
Mhm.
Do you mind taking us through? I guess we should like sort of go through the story of like, so you applied, you then submitted your proposal,
Mhm.
um, and it changed over the last 2 years, as we did dealing with COVID. Um, and so I want to show everyone, I guess, the finished mural if they haven't seen it in person. So good. It's gorgeous. Every time. Um, yeah, I guess before we deep dive into sort of the process of how you got here, um, tell us what this piece is about.
Yeah. So this piece is very much about kind of like personal growth and healing and just like self-care. It's just thinking about things that like, since COVID has started, I think a feeling of like healing, of like needing to heal, like amongst like, all of us as a society. Like I think that's really been pushed to the forefront. So I wanted to create something that kind of reflected like the self and the community, but especially the self. So we have this figure, like she's laying here pretty relaxed. We don't really know where she is, if she's like in her bedroom or outside. It's kind of ambiguous, like her surroundings. Um, and she has like her cat just kind of like tending to her. So she's really kind of just like looking at her leaves and her progress, and remembering to like, water herself. And the cat kind of the cat doesn't necessarily represent the community, but I thought about how, there are cats like present in like many bodegas around New York City. So I wanted to have that little tie-in. But it's really just about relaxation and joy, but knowing that like we need this in the world that we live in, that we need to emphasize rest and joy and relaxation. um the world goes on, but you need to give yourself a break sometimes.
I love, especially how you just broke it down. And I remember our conversations, especially when you sort of submitted your rendering to this particular sketch. And I loved the whimsiness of it, particularly the cat. And so how the cat automatically sort of makes you smile and laugh, and his little hat, and it's funny. And we talked about how much of um, in a community in ourselves, how much we think self-care is like not something that should be prioritized. And it's this thing that we constantly dismiss.
Hmm.
And how your piece, how Musa really plays on like that sense of whimsy and silliness of being like,
Hmm.
but it's not silly. It's not, it's not something we should dismiss. Um, and it's, yeah, and it just does it so beautifully. But like we said, this was a process. This isn't your first rendering. And I think, which is, it's so great that your piece itself is also about transformation. Let's go through from, I guess, like your very first submission of what you actually submitted to,
Yeah,
for us to say like, hey, we want to know more. Yeah, like, let's do
yeah,
it. And like, let's
yeah.
talk about the
So
growth.
in the beginning, I still wanted to incorporate the same themes that made it to the final piece. I think at first I thought I was going to be, well, I knew what wall I was going to be working on, but I wasn't sure of like the parameters. I was like, oh, do I have like the full span of the wall, or just, I thought I had the full wall. So this is a sketch. I knew it was like loose. I knew I could detail it some more. But I was just going to have our figure, our protagonist, she has like banana leaves and bananas growing from her head with a butterfly, and she's kind of like pouring into the earth. But Ayana, you updated me with the logistics of the wall, and we found out that we couldn't cover the whole wall. So from there, I knew I had to change the orientation of the piece, but I still wanted like the themes of growth and joy to still be there. Um, so I changed it. I changed some of the design.
Yeah. I also realizing you talking about this, where you were in the process, just to provide a little bit more of like clarity on sort of where the steps. So you submitted your sort of written proposal, and we're doing things a little bit different this year also. Um, of you sort of supplied, you're like, this is the work I've done. And we were like, great, what do you want to say?
Mhm.
And then what would you like to say? What's this about? And so that's sort of like, I guess, step 2 is what we're calling it now, Joyous, right? Is when you then submitted this rendering with sort of a brief explanation. I also wanted to touch briefly on a part of the project is sort of we asked, or we're charging the artist to think about the community and how they wanted the community to be involved. Do you mind sharing some of like what your initial thoughts were? And how you felt about that like challenge of being like, okay, it's up to you. We want you to involve the community in some way, but you get to decide.
Yeah, I thought it was a fun challenge because I've done some projects where I involve the community. But I think for a large part, I'm actually used to just like, working on a mural and not always having community input. But I thought it was a great experience. At first, I think we were thinking of, well, me and you, Ayana, we walked to various gardens around Harlem, and we were trying to find a way to incorporate either like folks from the garden or just having some kind of connection where maybe we did like a workshop with them. And I think that eventually it evolved to like something else. But also like there was some time that had passed, so it gave us time to kind of like, explore more than one option.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and it showed up in other ways. So we went and visited some of the community gardens in East Harlem and spoke to people who would work them and sort of learned a little bit about their specific roots of like how they started and what it meant to the community and the current fight that they were going through. But
Mhm.
I think the messaging of it worked its way versus like if it was like some of the cats we saw in the garden, some of the flowers, but also sort of tying into like, again, this going back into nature and gardening and how also sort of this idea of plants, especially in a neighborhood like East Harlem, where a lot of these community gardens are also a form of like not just self-care, but like an acts of self-determination, and how that also circled back into like playing the themes of the work. Um, can we show, so from this rendering, some time, as you mentioned, passed. And
Mhm.
I remember you and I had a conversation. We met up at a cafe in Brooklyn and we sort of like talked about where you were. Um, and where you were and if anything had sort of changed and how you were feeling. And then you came back with this. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember we, shared some articles and book recommendations together back and forth about self-care. And you came to sort of this sketch. Is there anything else you want to sort of say about?
Um, Not so much. I'm trying to think of the ways in which I went from like there to there.
Mhm.
Um, and I know for the orientation had a huge part of it, but then I was also thinking about like, the neighborhoods and like we have like the bodegas in the neighborhoods and how can I kind of put in something that incorporates like more of, what the community, like what we see in the community. So I mean butterflies are everywhere, but I don't know. I just think the cat, I kind of wanted I wanted to have a flow to it. So when you're looking at it, it kind of goes like up and down, up and down. So I'm just kind of like, okay, well, what shapes and what can I put? How can I make this flow so that it looks almost like a mountain range? And that's just kind of a part of my style. Like I like things to flow. Or I like my orientations to flow. But in terms of, I mean, she still has the banana leaves. She still has the watering can. I think this changed more, like the color palette changed more, just because, as I was starting to like get supplies and everything, I was like, okay, well, I would like this to be this color. Like, I don't think I want everything to be so green, so uniform. So I started kind of changing things along the way. And then when we were actually painting, like I'd try some colors out and they just wouldn't be the same. So we had to improvise and kind of go like make some things up along the way. But I'm used to working that way. So for me, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be a great time to ask a question about your first experience on scaffolding and the evolution of the projection sketch to the freehand. So that, can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was one of my favorite moments, for sure.
Yeah, sure. So the actual wall that we have was literally, it's right across, I'm blanking on the artist's name, but his wall is like literally right across from ours. And when I first ever saw that wall, I was like amazed. I was like, this is such a beautiful mural. And I want a wall like that. So when Ayana actually showed me the wall that I had, I was kind of shook because I didn't expect it to be like the wall that I manifested. Like I didn't think that I actually would manifest this wall. So that happened. And then, there were some challenges, I guess. Is it okay for me to jump into like the challenges? Okay. Yeah, there was a little bit of a challenge because just, we had like a big giant tree kind of in the middle, like close to where the wall was. And usually I would just like project the design. Or I would use like a certain type of grid, but this tree and this fence that were separated us from a playground really kind of made it hard for that. So I had to improvise a little bit and freehand some of it. And we were definitely on a time crunch. So I would say that was definitely a challenge. And we were probably literally working on the wall up until like the deadline, like at night. It was a rush to the finish line. But it turned out great.
Great. Watching you problem solve, I remember like we started off counting bricks. And then I don't know if I included a picture of it, but I have this great photo. So if not, it'll be on my Instagram later. But it's of Mattaya using the paintbrush and a rope. And chalk. Do you remember that? To lay out the sketch. And you kept apologizing, like, oh, I'm so sorry, it's taking me so long. And I was like, you were literally drawing freehand on 27 feet up high from a picture on your phone. You got this. Just take all the time you need, though. Like, you're doing it.
Yeah, we eventually got it done. And the community was a part of it too, because usually I did grid some of it out, and there were community members. We had a community day where folks were allowed to come and put like affirmations and write positive things on the wall. And I'm surprised that so many people showed up. It was really endearing. And I think when we were also next to a playground, so where there were a lot of like kids and young people nearby, but they were able to fill up a lot of the wall, like anything that you could reach without using a ladder. And that was a huge help and just like so appreciated.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of that too. So yes, it started our sort of community day, how we kicked off the mural. So going back to sort of how the community can be in part. So the first time we visited the wall and how we came up with this idea together. And actually, when you come and see it, you'll notice that I remember you had decided to intentionally leave one spot, a chalk drawing up. And it's because when we first came to visit the wall, we noticed that kids were drawing on the wall with chalk, and they would, write little words or messages, or they would be coloring the different bricks. And so we drew our inspiration for how the community was already using the wall, and thought, because of the piece is sort of about self-care, and the ways that care for yourself can extend to your community. What are some of the affirmations people have for themselves? And so we gathered some, from people who were in the park, who showed up and were able to come that day and actually paint it on the wall. We had some online, people texted us. And, I think this sort of gridding out system lasted a couple of days, this hybrid. And so also people like, while you were up there on the lift, or sketching things out, if someone walked by or said something to you, I was still collecting like words of affirmation for people. So people were sort of involved and somehow blessed. The foundation of this piece was what you created your beautiful artwork in. The real sort of way that you totally your brainchild, and Joyous and I have the pleasure, really Joyous actually, was able to sort of find the right partners was the sort of mural celebration. So once you completed it, and this was sort of your idea, and we wanted to like execute it, and that's what we did for you. Do you mind talking about sort of how you wanted to celebrate completing the mural with the community?
Yeah, can I add, if you would speak to the collaborative process of like getting to know the facilitator and creating that experience together, because it was really deeply rooted in community in both of your creative practices as well.
Yeah. So I knew that we wanted to have something that related to the piece, something that involved kind of like either planting or growing something. I mean, it's about personal growth. So we should involve someone who, you know, is knowledgeable about this. So Tasha, I think Joyous, you were able to find Tasha to come and teach a workshop, and it was such a beautiful day. Like we set up like a bunch of materials for like planting workshops, and Tasha led us through, you know, knowing how to grow like plants using just like rocks, like river rocks. And it was special. She had a moment where like, you know, you could dedicate it to someone who is no longer with you. So that made it even more like, I don't know, memorable, I guess. But that was also open to the community. So whoever was walking by was welcome to join. And we did get some people to be involved and also check out the mural. So I remember us kind of like going back and forth over email, like how do we want the day to look like? What kind of things, like what do we want to plan? And Tasha, I want to say Tasha took the lead with just like, you know, kind of shaping like what exactly was going to be planted, and just what we would be doing during the workshop, which is something that I actually appreciate, because like if someone knows more about what they're doing, you know, then they should absolutely take the lead. But it was great to just be a part of that and have her expertise on growing. I learned so much from it, and I think everyone who participated did too.
Definitely. There was a ton of just like synergistic alignment between like the heart of Musa and the work that Tasha does as an artist and as a community organizer. And she was really excited to plug in her Black rooting exercise, which I think you spoke a little bit about earlier, where folks were invited to actually plant seeds with intention, with some of those being focused towards like their ancestors and things that they were trying to root and grow for themselves. In the same way that like this mural has been planted in the community and is rooting all of these different connections through the creativity that you shared. So there was a lot of like just, you know, playing off of ideas. But as you can see in this photo with Eleanor, our marketing associate, cracking up laughing on the ground, there was just joy all around, honestly. And we're so grateful to have had Tasha with us as well for that day.
Right. I think one of my favorite moments from the day was just how organic it felt. It really just felt like people being together. It was also the area that the mural is in this public park, but for some reason it's sort of gated off. And so while we were painting, and since painting, have had to deal with access to it. But what was great, that while we were painting, the gates had to be open. And so because they were always open in a park that for so long they had been closed, people would come and just sit. We saw like mothers nursing. We had, one visitor who was a resident in the building who would come and sit with us every day and play jazz. And it was like, we had animal friends. We had like a little pigeon who would come and see us every day. But it was just such a beautiful how really we were able to bring people together to the space through this work. not only just like the message, but also like the physical, just being there as well, allowed for people to come and be a part of this area that they didn't know. And I remember that day especially, there was a woman who said that she had a horrible day and she was like, I'll just take it and do the activity at home. And then she just sat down just to see the instructions and really ended up enjoying the activity and was like, you know what, this actually like very much changed my day.
It was definitely a full circle moment from seeing folks set intentions for the energy that was actually present during the reveal. So just seeing the intentions come to life and manifest, I have to say, it was like a blessing in and of itself, and how much joy was in this. So
Yeah.
it was.
It really was a pleasure. I mean, it was hot. It took, we were there, you know, Mattaya, you worked very, very hard. But I mean, it's, besides it being gorgeous, it really, I think, you know, it stayed obviously, you know, with Joyous and I, but I also think there were people who participated in the activities, and it has, I think what's so powerful is how much the mural speaks to people in different ways.
Mm.
And I think, you know, we talked about sort of like how specific you should go to your story. And we said sort of like there's a certain level of universality in the specificity, right? So like it needs to be meaningful to you for a very reason. And because of that, other people will get it. And I really do think you accomplished it. So I wanted to thank you again for joining us. Not really sort of like a question, but I guess, do you have any sort of words of advice or any takeaways for, you know, maybe artists who might be watching this and thinking about applying?
Mhm. I would say that if you're submitting your design, or when you're submitting your design, when you get to that, you know, when you get to that spot, allow your design to be adaptable. Like, don't be so fixed on it. Like, this is how it looks. This is exactly how the final version is gonna look. Because just the way things are with like murals, if you're doing like an exterior piece, especially, you know, factors are, it's likely that you will have to kind of maybe change your work just a little bit. And also it's like you'll get other opinions on your work. So sometimes it's nice to kind of factor those in too. I would also say, thinking if there's like a timeline, just keep that in mind, because you know, when you have a project, you're very, you want to do the most, but sometimes you literally just, you don't have the time to do the most. So you still want it to look great, but just think about time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mattaya. Joyce,
Mhm.
did you have anything you wanted to?
No, just gratitude. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. If y'all have any other additional questions for Mattaya or want to learn more about Mattaya's work, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Instagram at Mattaya Fitts, so at MattayAFitts, or you can check out my website, just mattayafitts.com, and you can reach out to me there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.